So, I had this idea. What if we ranked every U.S. president in a tier list? So we've got every U.S. president from Washington to Biden. Uh, so some ground rules. We're only ranking them based off of their presidencies, not like their entire adult lives or anything.
Yeah.
And we're also like if they had a super short presidency, we're not really. We're just going off of what they did do as president if they had a super short one. And for modern presidents, it may be biased, but we are still going to rank the modern presidents. A lot of U.S. president tier lists don't do that because it's super controversial to do so. But see, because Bush Jr. was president when we were babies, and then Obama was president when we were in elementary school. Trump was president when we were in middle school, and Biden was president when we were in high school, and we're still in high school.
Yeah. Who are you joined here by?
Huh? Oh yeah, Colton. Dos seis. This guy, Washington. I think that's pretty. It's pretty fair, right?
Yeah. Set groundwork as the president's.
Yeah.
His cons were. I feel like most of his cons would have probably also been done if anybody else.
Yeah.
Were
things that would have happened
president.
anyway, and he handled it. I would say pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah.
John Adams. D. He's not F because I would say is complete and utter failure in all aspects. He stopped the importation of slaves. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
The Alien and Sedition Acts are probably the biggest tarnish to his reputation out of anything he did. And also the XYZ affair and the Quasi-War were definitely not good looks, and it's the reason that he didn't get reelected. Speaking of which, when he tried to get reelected, this guy got elected. Thomas Jefferson. I think that the Embargo Act was a mistake. And I think that his... Beats here. But I think that him being super against national banks, I think at the time, national banks were a good idea. And there's some other guy, we're gonna probably dog on for that too. But Louisiana Purchase, his Louisiana Purchase, pretty much. James Madison, War of 1812, but also I've heard his economic policy was pretty good, but also War of 1812, but he didn't do anything actually awful. He just kind of wasn't great at preventing the War of 1812.
Yeah, well, Ethan Tucker was talking to me before we recorded this and was just like, yeah, he was great, in the war, but he's horrible for the fact that he did absolutely nothing to prevent it from happening.
He straight up caused it to happen.
Yeah, but in the war, he was decent.
James Monroe, I think he did pretty good. I think Missouri Compromise kicked the can down the road for slavery, but I think most presidents would have done that. But I think his foreign policy was really good. His economic policy was really good. His domestic policy was really good. I would put him in A, but he's not top tier.
Yeah, like our boy Washington over there.
Yeah. John Quincy Adams. He's with his dad, I think.
Yeah, the only thing I remember him doing is just the fact that he is John Quincy Adams, and that's literally all.
The Tariff of 1828, also known as the Tariff of Abominations, was the worst ever, any form of taxation in the country up to that point. And also the bargain, it was a corrupt bargain. He actually lost the election, but because his opponent, Jackson, didn't have a majority of the electoral, he didn't have more than 50%, he basically, the Speaker of the House at the time was pro John Quincy Adams, so he convinced Congress to elect John Quincy Adams
Yeah,
as president.
I remember a whole thing in my U.S. history class where my teacher was just like, yeah, he should never have been president.
Yeah.
But he was.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew Jackson. He is a very polarizing figure because he shut down I believe it was actually the second national bank at this time, and he caused, but he did not orchestrate the Trail of Tears. That was this guy. But he like he did the start of the Trail of Tears. He did not do all of it, but he had really loose economic policy. He actually hated the concept of paper money. I don't know how that works, and I don't know what his alternative would have been. Probably metal,
Yeah.
but
The bartering system.
yeah, but he didn't destroy the country or anything. Like he wasn't one of the presidents, like, like this guy, or this guy, or definitely this guy who kicked the can down the road of like the slavery. He didn't really do anything to like anger either side, and I
Yeah.
gotta give him props for that.
Yeah, plus I feel like everybody knows him, but
Yeah.
like knows nothing of what he did.
Yeah. But I feel like there are some people who would put him surprisingly high. I think he did too much harm to ever put him here.
Yeah.
But I don't think he destroyed the country, even
Yeah,
though he did a lot of destructive things.
Yeah, he's kind of average.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Martin Van Buren. He's the one who orchestrated most of the Trail of Tears, but other than that, I mean, he was super unpopular at the time, but I don't really remember much about what he did.
Yeah, I definitely remember the name. I really don't know what he did though.
Yeah, Van Buren, I would say D tier, if not maybe F tier, but I feel like if it was F tier, it'd be obvious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So D tier. William Henry Harrison. So I don't know whether I should make him his own tier for like he didn't have the chance to do anything. Hold on, let's just.
Yo, womp womp.
Okay. He didn't get the chance to do anything. The only thing he did was appoint his cabinet, and they all resigned like 6 months after.
Yeah.
The only one that didn't was Daniel Webster, his Secretary of State, and I think that was a very good choice. But John Tyler, normally I would say he's an F tier, because personally I don't like him. Not only do I personally not like him, I think he was not a good politician. I don't think he was even remotely good at his job. However, because Congress was against him, he couldn't get anything done. So any negatives towards him didn't actually really affect his presidency. So I'm actually going to put him in D tier.
Okay.
Because the Democrats hated him because, he wasn't a Democrat. He didn't run on the Democratic platform. And the Whigs, the other party at the time, hated him because he ran on the Whig ticket, but he was a former Democrat. And both parties hated him. So he got kicked out. So technically, Washington isn't the only one to not be part of a political party. So Tyler was kicked out of both of them.
I just wanted to quickly say, he's the one that has a grandchild that's still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like 90.
Yeah.
Let's see. James Knox Polk. I think he's quite underrated. I do think that the Mexican-American War was a war of aggression.
Yeah.
And there's no doubting that.
Yeah.
However, he promised to serve only 4 terms, which he died 3 months after his term ended anyway. But he promised to only do 1 term, and he got every single one of his campaign promises done.
Okay.
Every single one. So I think because of that, I'm actually going to put him in B tier. Not A or S, because there's nothing in particular that I can think of where it's like that's an amazing thing that he did. He was just overall like just a good. He was just good at his job.
Yeah.
Um, Zachary Taylor. I could put him in Womp Womp, but he did have. Oh shoot.
Yeah.
He did have some things going for him. He did actually try to stop the expansion of slavery. And he was one of the first presidents at the time of this time period of these four dough faces here, to actually do that. And I really admire that about him because he was a southern plantation owner, but he tried to stop the expansion of slavery, which is weird, but
Good.
you know, but I would put him in C because he died. He was inaugurated in March of 1849, and he died in July of 1850. So he didn't really have that much of a presidency.
Yeah.
Millard Fillmore is the reason we have anime.
S tier.
No, because
Wait,
he opened up trade with Japan.
Yeah.
And the reason that anime even exists is actually because of American comic books.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly say, if you guys have ever seen the video by Bill Wirtz, which you totally should, for the history of Japan, he makes a joke about it, where, like, the U.S. Navy goes over to Japan, and they're just like,
"Open the country. Stop having it be closed," said the United States.
But I think Millard Fillmore, I think a lot of people say that he was one of the worst presidents in history. Oh yeah, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which made it so that not only were slaves still property in northern states, but they could actually be legally kidnapped by law enforcement and sent back to their masters.
oh,
I would say
not S tier.
I would say D or F. I think the opening of trade with Japan was not really that big because at the time, in the 1850s, Japan, it wasn't until probably the Meiji era that that Japan ever became any sort of economic power that became somewhat relevant to international trade.
Yeah, I don't think, at the time especially, people were just like, that was kind of pointless.
Yeah.
Franklin
Pierce. My April Fool's video was about how cool Franklin Pierce is. His Secretary of War was Jefferson Davis.
Okay.
He oversaw the Gadsden Purchase, which was probably the best thing he did in 1852, I believe. And it was basically a land treaty 1854. It was a land treaty that basically gave access to what is now the southern border of Arizona and New Mexico. And it allowed, because there's very nice land there apparently. And because above that it was too rocky. So they needed some land you could actually live on below there. And that's why you have that weird dip. After Texas, there's a dip right there. Still F tier because also he was from New Hampshire, but he was super pro-slavery and pro-South. He's what's called a doughface, which is a northerner with southern sympathies, which at the time included, slavery, pretty not objectionable at all.
Yeah.
And, also Bleeding Kansas. I forgot to mention Bleeding Kansas.
Yeah.
Where
God.
where he wanted to let the people of Kansas decide if they wanted to be a free or slave state or not.
Which was possibly one of the worst decisions you could have done in that position.
James Buchanan.
Yeah. I just want to quickly...
I think another F. He's actually worse than the other two. I'm going to make a row below.
Make Ultra Womp.
No. Just Z tier. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, you can just... Yeah. I just want to quickly say that if you're wondering why I'm not talking that much, I'm knowledgeable on most of the presidents in the past 50, maybe 100 years. I'm not knowledgeable much at all on most of the presidents before Lincoln.
I think
so.
A lot of the presidents, I would say around Lincoln, the early presidents, and the recent presidents, they're memorable. But the ones that are surrounding Lincoln, so like Martin Van Buren to James Buchanan, and then like Rutherford Hayes to like I don't know, probably William McKinley, are all super unmemorable. So
Yeah. Like, I mean, I remember a lot of the ones in, like, very late 1800s to, like, middle 1900s because of my U.S. history class,
Yeah.
but I don't really remember much of the 1800s presidents at all.
Okay. Now, Abraham Lincoln, here's the thing, is that a lot of people like to say he's not S tier because during the Civil War he suspended the writ of habeas corpus, which is your right to a trial, and he like arrested journalists for saying things against the government or the government's handling of the war or supporting the Confederacy or something like that, and just like saying this, not like actively like action wise supporting, but just saying, maybe this Confederate thing isn't such a bad thing, which I'm not pro Confederacy, but I am pro free speech. So, like, a lot of people say that makes him not S tier, but it's Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Yeah, if we put George Washington in S tier, I feel like you kind of have to put
Yeah,
Lincoln
I think
in S tier.
there are probably going to be other S tiers probably
Yeah.
by the end of this list, but these are the two that have to be an S
Yeah,
tier.
those two are like the big boys.
That's crazy. Anyway,
Uh,
he's
yeah.
he set back black rights for like the next 100 years,
Yeah.
and while he didn't fully like, he didn't want to do Reconstruction to the extent that Grant did. Also, that's why he was super unpopular with like half the countries, because they were doing Reconstruction, and he kept troops in the South to stop the government from terrorizing black people. He shut down the first iteration of the KKK until this motherfucker, uh, brought them back, because he was like, yeah, what a noble cause that they had. But Grant was super unpopular at the time. But I think he's up here. Maybe even up here.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I would personally put him in A tier. Now I am kind of biased for Grant because I love his history and like the Civil War and stuff, but like, I mean, as president, I would say he was great. There was just like, there were a couple things where like, he was just like, man, I don't really know how to handle this. There's like way too many people involved for like the scandal that he was involved with. I cannot remember what it was.
He did have some corruption scandals, but
yeah,
that was just the way that politics was done at the time.
Yeah, see, another thing though is that like we learn about him in U.S. history with like the scandal and stuff.
The spoil system, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is though is that like for the whole entire Gilded Age, he was the least bad out of all of them by far.
Speaking of shitty Gilded Age presidents, I don't think he's F.
Okay.
Because he didn't destroy the country like these F tiers did, or these Z tiers. Definitely really destroyed the country. This one directly led to the Civil War, and this one led to 100 years of black disenfranchisement. But he was super corrupt, even more corrupt than Grant. And he, like John Quincy Adams, was also a fraud, as he didn't actually get elected to the office. Although he actually lost the popular vote, but won the electoral vote by 1 vote.
Bruh.
That's not a joke. It was by 1 electoral vote. But Samuel Tilden actually won the popular vote. So, wonder what that timeline would have been like. But in part of the compromise of 1876, he withdrew troops from the South, which, by the way, in the Grant administration, were stopping like the southern states' governments from terrorizing and disenfranchising black people. And because that was no longer being enforced, we have, along with this guy, actually, no, I'm going to put him in F tier, actually, we have decades of black disenfranchisement, which, to an extent, we're still feeling the repercussions of today. James Garfield, I really like James Garfield, but he didn't have a chance to do anything. So
Yeah,
he's
he was
gonna
just
go
kind of
walk
like,
along.
he was just kind of just killed.
He could write in two different languages with both hands at the same time.
That's cool, but also has nothing to do like I'm not saying that that's like a bad thing. It's just really funny.
He was probably the smartest president. He's the smartest person to ever be president, probably. Okay, Chester Arthur. Um, I. D- he is the reason that the Navy is as powerful it is now. Is that a good thing? I don't know, but
See, I just want to quickly say that is so far the first name that I didn't recognize.
yeah, he
So-
he is literally. I looked at like statistics. He is the most forgettable U.S. president.
Oh well.
Yeah. I think number 2 is Franklin Pierce.
Okay.
But yeah, he built up the Navy, and it's most of it. Oh yeah, Chinese Exclusion Act. He
Oh.
stopped Chinese people from immigrating to the U.S. and people who had already immigrated. He basically made it so that if you leave, you can't come back.
Dang.
I think. Yeah, I think to the same extent that Rutherford B. Hayes caused decades of black disenfranchisement, Chester Arthur caused decades of Asian disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
Because I think it applied to most East Asian countries and not just Chinese countries. Because I don't think it was ever officially called the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yeah. You guys can fact check us on that.
Yeah.
So.
Grover Cleveland, which is the second, probably the funnest name to say.
Sorry. There's a lot of there's a lot of jokes with his name.
I recognize that silhouette anywhere.
I can't believe they added Grover Cleveland.
I think he was very anti-corruption. Like he used more vetoes. Actually, I don't think this is true, but I think on average per year, he used more vetoes than any other U.S. president in history. And because he would veto anything that he thought would give any part of the government too much power, because he thought that the government shouldn't have too much power because it's a free country,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. However, he was super unpopular in his second term, but I'm gonna put him in C tier. I think
That's fair. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, in U.S. history, my teacher said that he is possibly the most average president.
Yeah. Benjamin Harrison sucked. He's probably top of F. We're not even ordering these tiers.
Yeah, we're not, but
D tier, probably. Oh, wait. So, the only thing I can think of is Wounded Knee, which was a massacre of a bunch of Native Americans, and he basically gave out medals of honor for the perpetrators of the massacre. And yeah, I think I'm going to go on a limb here. I think that's pretty bad.
Yeah. Like.
McKinley. I think he probably is C, maybe B tier, but I think I dislike his very interventionist foreign policy. Like, the Spanish-American War did not need to happen.
Yeah.
Although it was the journalists that kind of pushed it to happen, and then it was Congress. It wasn't really McKinley, but he did kind of. I think any war or anything bad that happens with the U.S., the president, whether they actively were the cause of it or not, are kind of complicit in it. And that is also the case. It's going to be really the case with this guy. But I think the Spanish-American War, not great. I don't think there was anything else that was super notable. He got shot in Ohio.
Oh.
Only president to be assassinated in Ohio. Yeah, I would probably put him in C because he was a really average. I would say for the most part, he was an above average president, which puts him in B, but because of his super interventionist foreign policy, I would put him down to C. Because
Yeah.
I'm anti interventionist. That's just my personal opinion, but I think we've seen in recent years what interventionism can do to other countries, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we just see it on the news 24/7. At the time, people weren't as well informed on the effects of it. Same thing with like colonialism, stuff like that. Um, Theodore Roosevelt, I don't think he's S tier. Because of, again, he was a successor of McKinley,
Yeah.
so he had a super interventionist foreign policy. However, I think he was a much better leader,
Yeah.
and he was. Oh yeah, and at the time, a big thing was like railroad and oil companies having massive This is a U.S.
Yeah.
history thing.
Yeah.
Was oil and railroad companies having massive trusts and like massive monopolies on things, and he broke up a bunch of oil companies. That's how we.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah.
we have Shell and Chevron and
Yeah,
et cetera.
and not just the freaking Standard Oil Company.
Yeah, so I don't think he's S because of like the Philippine American War.
Yeah.
He had more testosterone than every other man on this list combined. That's
Alright.
Taft. He was just like we have Theodore Roosevelt at home. So I think Taft is probably. I think he was a pretty effective leader. He actually became Chief Justice later on. Do you know that?
No.
He's the only U.S. president to ever become Chief Justice after leaving office. He actually, and because the Chief Justice swears in the new president, he actually swore in Herbert Hoover.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. But
Herbert was fine in the beginning of his term. It was just like 8 months into his first term. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I don't know if I would put Taft in the same place as Jefferson and Polk. So I'm gonna put him in C.
yeah.
I feel like we really should break up C tier, but I don't care enough. Wilson, like, also he's the reason that the KKK got rebooted basically in the first place,
Yeah.
which is the reason that they still exist. And while it wasn't as bad as this motherfucker and this motherfucker and this motherfucker in terms of minority disenfranchisement, I do think that the whole, what's the word? His whole white supremacist rhetoric that he harbored a lot of the time, I don't think he's in Z tier. A lot of people would put him in Z tier. I would not, but I would put him in F tier.
Like low F though.
Yeah. High Z. But I don't know. I think his 14 points were good. Like, if they had passed, they didn't. So it doesn't really matter. Warren G. Harding. Now, Warren Gamaliel Harding.
That's his middle name?
Yeah.
That's so dumb.
Was really corrupt. Surprisingly, despite being a politician, could not possibly care less about politics. He actually, despite the fact that this is during Prohibition, actually, no, that's another thing to go against Woodrow Wilson on. He started Prohibition. But despite, he also passed women's suffrage. But that was gonna happen anyway. That, like, literally, he was super pressured to do it by Congress. That was
Okay.
gonna happen anyway.
Damn it, that means that he's like in some random in-between tier of F and Z.
No, that means he's Z+. He's high Z. Okay, Warren Harding was super corrupt. He had basically just his buddies from college as his cabinet. That's not a joke. And he didn't care about politics. And, yeah, I would say he didn't do as much... Because Z has to be like, they deeply damaged the country.
Yeah.
F is they failed on all accounts. And I think he did that.
Yeah.
John Calvin Coolidge Jr. He was actually pretty cool. I think what was funny, I think it was his inauguration speech or one of his State of the Union addresses. He like goes on this really long monologue on why like the America is like a person and you have to like feed it and clothe it, and he goes on for so long and it is so funny. And he have you ever heard what Calvin Coolidge sounds like?
No.
You need to hear this. Hold on.
Of its energy to restore itself. The costs of government are all assessed upon the people. No ma-
Guess what state he's from?
Hmm.
Guess. Just guess.
It's like, I feel like that'd be like Mid-South.
Vermont.
Huh?
Yeah, he's from Vermont.
He does not sound like...
Born and raised. Yeah. But he was super, like... I feel like he's every Republican's wet dream. You know what I mean? Every, like, moderate Republican. And I'm no moderate Republican, but I can see where they're coming from. You know what I mean? I think... Well, because his economic policy is what caused the Roaring '20s. His economic policy... Oh, wait. I don't have a camera on. This motherfucker's economic policy is what caused the Great Depression. But this motherfucker's economic policy caused the Roaring '20s.
Okay.
And this little piggy went to the market.
And this little piggy went home.
Anyway, I would say probably... actually, I think he's A tier.
Yeah, Roaring 20 is like...
Like, I think... No, he wasn't. I was going to say he was the first one with the car. That was McKinley. Which is weird because that was like a year after the car was invented. Hoover.
Let's go.
I don't think he deeply... Well...
I don't think he...
Okay, to be fair... Actually, no. Because he caused... Actually, did he cause the Great Depression? It's unclear.
Well, the whole thing is that...
Regardless, he was terrible at handling it and made it last way longer than it needed to.
Yeah.
And because the Depression spread throughout the world, it is part of the reason that the whole, that what was that? What was the dude with the mustache with the in Germany? Oh, what was his name? The Depression, the economic turmoil that the world and Germany, including, because in the world was in, is part of the reason we had World War II. Z tier. Also, I don't think he's as bad at his job as these other three. But his presidency itself is Z tier.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, he was essentially, if you have like a really older, more I guess back with the times parent, if you like mess something up and are sad, because he essentially just said suck it up. Like he did not...
Yeah, he did nothing. He was like, oh yeah, we need to like chillax on like... It was because he was one of those small government types of guys, which sometimes that's great, like with the Grover Cleveland. But sometimes that's not what you need, which is why we had Franklin Roosevelt,
Yes.
who was very pro like government overreach, but that was exactly what the country needed at the time, because the agencies that he created and the programs and the executive orders and everything else that he created got America out of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And led them through the war as well. And also, probably up there with like Ronald Reagan and like Washington and like, I don't know, some other one. He was probably the best like speaker. Oh, Theodore Roosevelt. He was probably the best speaker and like leader of any president. Like, have you ever heard one of these?
Yes, yeah.
His speeches are chilling. And he would,
And
he was so active with the American people. He would, like, basically, well, there was no way for the other presidents, like these guys, to ever do that. But because the radio had become mainstream, he had, like, fireside chats with the American people. And I think...
Yeah, he essentially had, like, the first American podcast.
Yeah, he had the first podcast. And I would honestly...
Yeah.
I would say he's the best president in American history. because of how many things I mentioned, and that's just surface level
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, he single-handedly pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression. That's not something that, like, just a normal guy...
Truman. I would say he's in one of these tiers. Let's talk about Truman for a bit, because I think that there's a lot of different ways you could approach this. Because the bomb, I think Truman. Now, what's your opinion on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I watched a documentary on it saying that it wasn't really that necessary, but here's the thing: Truman didn't know that. We have so much hindsight, but I think from his point of view, it was justified.
Yeah.
You
it,
know,
like, was and wasn't at
It's
the same
benefit
time.
of the doubt sort of thing.
Yeah. Like, it's terrible. It is a horrible, horrible thing. But in his mind, there was really nothing else he could do.
And also Korea.
True.
Also, I listened to his first inaugural address, or no, technically his second. I don't think he had an inaugural address when he was first inaugurated, so it would have been his 1949 address. But it is one of the best. Also, he started the Cold War. He started Trumanism, the Truman Doctrine, which is containing communism, and I think that stuff like that was gonna happen anyway. But I think the way that he did it was fine. Although war in Korea, not very cash money of him, but I do think that he's in B tier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eisenhower.
Yeah,
Okay.
the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat.
So, I think that was a bad look. However, he was fine. I mean, I think he's above these guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's above or with. But I think, yeah.
Alright.
Now, Kennedy.
So, the boy, Kennedy.
Nothing bad ever happened to the Kennedys. But, I think, great leader. Great speaker.
Great voice.
Yeah. That's not what your country can do for you. That's what you can do for your country.
Now,
That's what we together can do for the freedom of man. Okay. I think he's one of these, maybe even here, but the banned pigs invasion makes it so he can't be up here. Although, you could say that FDR's Japanese internment camp thing, that would bring him down. Who knows? Because I just remembered that, and I forgot to mention it when we were gushing about how cool FDR is. But, yeah, I think JFK. He's... Nah. Because a lot of people, have reverence for him, but it's just because he was assassinated. And they don't really talk about anything he did.
Yeah, see, the thing is with Kennedy, though, is that,
He started the space race. I forgot about that. Proclaimed we were going to the moon. He didn't start the space race. Here's the thing. Here's something really interesting. I saw this video by Alternate History Hub. It was what if Kennedy was never assassinated? And, okay, so Lyndon B. Johnson. What a guy.
Yeah.
The reason that the Civil Rights Act was passed was because he was a Southern Democrat. So a lot of Northern because back then North was Republican, South was Democrat. So a Northern Democrat, they're like, who's this? Because the Republicans didn't like him because he wasn't a Republican. The Democrats didn't like him because he wasn't a Southerner. So a lot of the things that he did probably wouldn't have passed if he hadn't have passed. And terrible turn of phrase, but because he was a Southern Democrat, and there was, I believe, a Democrat majority in Congress at the time, Johnson actually got a lot of the Civil Rights Acts passed.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I think this might be the most did a lot of really good, did a lot of really bad president of all time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I think that Lyndon B. Johnson, it's so difficult to rank him because he started the war in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
He continued the war in Vietnam. but also he passed multiple civil rights reforms
Mm-hmm.
that stopped although the Supreme Court is what really ended segregation, but he passed tons of voting rights acts, and deadly wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans
See,
the right to vote in this country.
another thing, though, at least according to my U.S. history teacher, a lot of the stuff he passed, Kennedy was going to pass and planning to do it.
Yeah.
And he just kind of stole the spotlight from him.
Yeah, but we can't judge him for things he was going to do.
No,
Same way
I'm
we can't judge
judging.
these guys.
I'm judging Lyndon B. Johnson for that.
Yeah. Well, I think whether or not it was Kennedy was going to do it. That's my charger.
Yeah.
Whether or not Kennedy was going to do it, I think we have to acknowledge Johnson did do it, because a lot of vice presidents that become president after a president dies don't continue on what their previous president did, which is great in some cases. Like this guy, he died and his vice president, this guy became president. So sometimes that's a great jump, but other times, like this guy, he died and his vice president was this guy.
Yeah.
But I think the fact the point still stands that
Yeah.
I think he would be A if it weren't for Vietnam.
Yeah.
Richard Milhous Nixon. He was a crook. And Watergate, pretty not very cash money.
The thing is, though, is he was probably going to win the presidency anyways, and then he just had to do that.
And he had no reason to do that because he was already relatively popular. He won his first election by a landslide.
Yeah.
Like,
wasn't it like the single biggest
other than 1984?
Okay.
Good things about Nixon's presidency, which surprisingly there are some. He opened up trade with China, and also eased relations with the Soviet Union as well. That is the list of the good things about Nixon's presidency. Actually, no. I think there were some good things, but I think a lot of them are they're just not notable enough in comparison. Bad things, I don't actually remember any. I remember his vice president being corrupt. I think, because Watergate doesn't necessarily mean corruption, it just means bad actions. It was bad, spying and stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily corruption in, the administration itself. At least from what I know. If anyone has evidence to the contrary, please comment below.
Still really stupid, though.
Yeah. Anyway, where are we going to put Nixon?
A place on a tier list.
Tell me a tier right now. Tell me a tier to put Nixon.
X tier.
No, actually. No, genuinely.
I have a C.
I think I would put him in D, actually.
Yeah. F. Z.
No, the real reason I would put him in F is because of the way that he handled Vietnam. It wasn't necessarily bad in terms of the war effort, because he was trying his hardest to stop it from he was just trying to end it. But the problem is that the way that he handled Vietnam, especially with the media, was it caused what is still there today, a rift between the people and the government. And this is something our U.S. history teacher talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Which I think that was just a side effect of Vietnam in general, but definitely changed under the Nixon administration with Watergate happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And that was actually, because of that, I might even put him in C. Because it literally changed the way that American society functions for the worst, which is what these four guys also did. Gerald Ford, he didn't really do anything, because he had 2.5 years as president after Nixon resigned.
The only thing I know about him is the stuff you've told me and the stuff that I just know about him being
Nothing
an absolute unit.
I'm going to put him in Womp Womp. Nothing
true.
happened. You can't even judge him for anything that happened because he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
He didn't have the chance to do anything. Actually, no. I'm going to put him in C, because what he did do is he healed the country from the nightmare of Watergate and Vietnam, and he ended Vietnam, and he was an honest man, which is what the world needed after Nixon.
Who was not an honest man.
I would put him in B, but there's not really any policy that I would say is like super outstanding.
Yeah. All right, it's time for
The boy, James Earl Carter Jr.
the most wholesome president on the entire list.
Yeah, but you have to be a little bit of a sociopath to be a good president. So,
Yeah.
Iran hostage crisis. So, Jimmy Carter, in the Iran hostage crisis, tried for like 3 years to
Remove the
to keep these American diplomats safe in an Iran embassy, in an American embassy in Iran, and he wasn't able to do it until like 3 days before Reagan was inaugurated, and he got all the credit.
And it was also really, really poorly done.
Yeah.
And there was also just like natural disasters that happened, right? That
Yeah.
just like slowed it down.
Also, actually, the Soviet-Afghan War, I believe, was under him, which created the Mujahideen. Do you know who they became? They became the Taliban.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he basically supplied these Islamic militants with like helicopters and stuff in Afghanistan, which they still have under the Taliban.
Not that good.
Jimmy Carter created the Taliban. Think about that.
Well, to be fair, Jimmy Carter is a peanut farmer. Like that.
Stagflation. He didn't do shit. Ronald Wilson Reagan. Okay, it's so hard to like talk about him because so many people are like, yeah, he was like the best president of all time, and I'm like, okay, did Reaganomics work? No.
It's really funny though.
Yeah.
The
It's
name
like-
is really funny.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so basically, if we cut the tax for the rich, so let them have more money, they might pay their workers more. And it's like,
Money.
do you know rich people?
Yeah.
They're not going to pay their workers more just because they have more money. They're going to hoard their money more. And that's what happened. Foreign policy. He would, like, constantly just talk shit to foreign leaders, which, like, actively made the risk of nuclear war constant.
But think about it. It's funny.
Okay, but also, he started the crack epidemic.
Let's go.
Yo, another president that harmed communities of black people.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just gonna quickly say about Reagan. I feel like a lot of stuff he did, he had good intentions, but like none of it worked out. I am going to try my absolute hardest to not talk about these presidents at all personally.
Yeah.
Purely just what they did.
I'm trying not to speak about modern politics. I'm trying to speak about their policies and their effects, and whether
Yeah.
or not their policies were not only a good idea but well executed. Because that's how I would rank. That's how I ranked every other president.
Mhm.
So okay, Bush Senior,
He's a character.
He had decent foreign policy, but there were some downfalls to it. His economic policy, I think, was it? I think it was the early '90s where like the American economy was like, it was fine, it was just fine. Clinton, it was great. Like literally, his like 2000 State of the Union address, he's like, literally, our economy has been the best it has ever been in history, and it's like he gets like a standing ovation because that was the last one where Congress wasn't polarized on the president, and both parties liked him because he was a moderate. I think
I feel like he's kind of average.
he's C or B. He's C, maybe B.
Yeah, I'd say C.
Yeah. Okay.
Bill Clinton.
Okay. Monica Lewinsky has nothing to do with his policies.
Yeah.
he's the only one to ever pay off the national. Actually, no, Andrew Jackson did. Fun fact.
Oh, well, I mean, that's also way too far fact for it to even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back here, the national debt was like $64,000.
Yeah, which at the time, yeah, that's a bit of money, but one person could own that. There were many people that owned that amount.
Yeah,
now,
like 4 people, but there were people.
Yeah, now it's so much that you could probably combine all the wealth in the U.S. and might be able to pay it off.
Yeah, so I think Bill Clinton, honestly, I would say he's the last great president.
Yeah, in terms of what he did for the country.
Yes. Okay. So George W. Bush was I think he handled 9/11 quite well at the time, and then immediately invaded Afghanistan. I wouldn't say for no reason, but not a really good one. And then he invaded Iraq under false pretenses of WMDs, which didn't exist. And honestly, I think George W. Bush is just really stupid, and it was...
Yeah.
And they say Joe Biden's a puppet. I think Bush was a puppet. Okay, I got a special place on the tier list for him.
Really? Okay. I don't agree or disagree, because I will have to... Okay.
Anyway.
The Barack Hussein Obama II.
The sequel. Okay. What did he do? Obamacare, which really didn't help that many people out. Although, people that it did help out pretty cash money, but I think it was it was a step in the right direction, not big enough of a step. He killed Bin Laden. I think that was pretty swag. Yeah. Healthcare reform. Let's see. Oh, he got the Wall Street reform that kind of ended the Great Recession, which actually I think Obama handled the Great Recession. I wouldn't say better than FDR did, but he handled it faster. Like, the economy recovered from the Great Recession faster than it did from the Depression, because it was a smaller one, but still. He also invested in a bunch of third world countries, and also created a lot of carbon regulations. Gay marriage.
Oh yeah, that's a plus.
And also, I think he didn't repeal it, but he reformed the No Child Left Behind Act.
I
think he's probably D, or maybe I think he's C tier.
Yeah, he's like almost B.
Okay, Trump. I can just speak about what he did and whether I think it was a good idea, a bad idea, good execution, bad execution,
Or
good
neutral.
effect, bad effect,
Or neutral.
or neutral. But
We've not really been doing much neutral stuff though.
well, because there's no reason mentioning it, because it doesn't affect the ranking whatsoever.
Yeah.
But so Trump, he created a lot of jobs, I think.
True. Yeah.
The unemployment rate was the lowest in, I believe, 2018. The economy was in great shape while he was president, although that is true with Obama as well. Yeah, I think his handling of COVID-19 was a disaster, as in I don't think he did nothing, but he did next to nothing. However, he didn't actually have much of a presidency left. He didn't have much of his term left.
Yeah.
He pulled out of a lot of environmental reform agencies, intergovernmental organizations, like the Paris Agreement, I believe. And I think that was a bad move, personally. Although I don't know how much those organizations even affect carbon emissions globally. But I'm just going to say that, as a whole, I think that that's not the greatest idea. And I think that the wall was not only a stupid idea, but a bad investment that he didn't even finish it. And
yeah.
because it's not, it's not from like an immigration point. It's like not from a point of view of like, it's more like if you wanted to stop immigration, that's not the way to do it. He did great for the economy. I think it was just his last year. If he hadn't had his last year, I think he would have been probably C tier because there was nothing exemplary he did. Like there was no exemplary like act or anything like that he did.
Yeah, he would have been. He would have essentially just been like a Jimmy Carter that was actually sociopath.
I would actually say C tier.
Okay.
I would honestly say that while they're very different ideologically, they're pretty similar in quality as presidents. Joe Biden. Now, he's not done yet. So this is as of week 1 of April 2024. He's still in office, but so far, he repealed some infrastructure bills that Trump passed. He re-entered the Paris Agreement and a couple other climate regulation organizations. I don't think he was the cause of the 2021 recession. I think that was just like a domino effect of COVID, but he's done nothing about it, and because of the pipeline bill that he repealed from the Trump administration, gas is really expensive, and a lot of people like to blame Biden for it, and I think that while it's not entirely his fault, I think there is some stuff that he could have done to prevent it, and I don't think he did that.
Yeah.
And the same thing with inflation, because there's been mass amounts of inflation in a lot of other parts of American history, like let's see. Martin Van Buren had to deal with inflation. John Quincy Adams had to deal with inflation. FDR had I think that was deflation. Jimmy Carter had to deal with deflation. Barack Obama. Like a lot of these had to deal with economic turmoil. And a lot of the better presidents, and even the mid-tier presidents, I think they did really well at handling that economic turmoil that the country was in, like the Great Recession. I think Obama did quite a good job. Not the best possible job, because he's not perfect, but I think he did a really good job at handling it. I don't think that Biden did a really good... I don't think he did a good job in healing the country after the 2021 recession, because it's still occurring. Like, inflation is still, although I believe it has gone down a little bit, it is still at an unhealthy level. And I don't think that any president has allowed inflation to be that high for that period of time right now. Let's rank where he is right now. I would say maybe F, but I don't think it's fair, because it's fair to put him in F when he's not finished. Actually, I'm gonna put him in Womp Womp because he's not finished yet. We don't know. So far, I'd put him in D or F, but
yeah,
actually, yeah. I think I'm pretty satisfied with this. Actually,
yeah.
I'm kind of annoyed by this. I'm gonna put the Womp Womps in their tiers, but I'm just gonna clarify. It's really unfair to rank them, but I'm still gonna rank them anyway, because it annoys me that I haven't ranked all of them. Harrison, he did nothing, so I'm gonna put him here in order of the tier, so he'd be here. It annoys me that these aren't in order. Hold on, there we go. Wilson is in the middle of Z. Okay, Garfield actually did get some stuff done. I don't remember what he got passed, but he got something passed. I remember it being pretty good. I think it was to do with railroad company regulation, I believe. But I'm not sure. But because he didn't do anything, I'm still just gonna put him here in C. And then Joe Biden, I'm gonna put in D.
Now,
actually, I'm gonna put him in F. I'm gonna move Reagan up to D.
Now, while we're here, we need to look at Z.
Mm-hmm.
Who is in purely just what they did in office, our opinion, the worst president.
I think it's between Johnson and Buchanan.
Yeah.
Buchanan, states seceded after Lincoln got elected, but before he was inaugurated, and he did nothing about it. He actually was supportive. While he was a Unionist, he wasn't a Confederate. He was not really anti-Confederate either. He was kind of neutral on the whole issue. Andrew Johnson was a Unionist. However, he was really racist, and he was the reason that Jim Crow laws exist, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he repealed federal regulations against the disenfranchisement of black people, and he's the reason that that black people were disenfranchised for 100 years. Literally, almost exactly 100 years after he left office was when Martin Luther King was given speeches. That's 100 years of black disenfranchisement. And to an extent, because of like redlining, black people are still disenfranchised because of policies enacted under the Andrew Johnson administration. So I would say Andrew Johnson is the worst president in American history.
Now.
And the best, FDR, actually no, George Washington. Because there are things you can criticize these two over. I don't think there's really that much you can criticize George Washington over. Because you can say, oh, he arrested journalists for talking bad about the involvement in the war. Oh, he put Japanese Americans in internment camps, which may actually put him down to A, but I wouldn't. I still think he's S tier. Despite that, although I'm not going to say I support him doing that.
Yeah, he just did way too much good.
Yeah, he did way too much good to even put him down from, something horribly racist and harmful. Because he did a lot of good, but George Washington, name a bad thing he did. I mean, he could have handled the Whiskey Rebellion better, but he could have been more favorable to France in the Jay's Treaty, but I don't think there was anything that he could have done way better.
The technically negative things that he did weren't really they were not impactful. They were more of just like, oh, well, he probably could have handled that better.
Localized in time, they mattered at the time, but they don't. Yeah. They didn't really impact even the next few presidencies. They didn't affect even just the next few years after they happened.
Obviously, he could have said, oh, slavery bad.
Yeah.
In which, out of presidency, he did. But,
okay, you gotta think about the fact that he was a plantation owner. Yeah. His financial well-being would be in jeopardy if he ever did that. Now, I don't think that makes it excusable that he was, not doing anything about the whole slavery issue, but it does make it more understandable and more,
Yeah, plus, he didn't really like it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the whole thing of,
he was humble, and he was super self-conscious. He was constantly self-conscious about, what the presidency means and what it'll become, and the fact that he's setting a precedent with every single thing he does, the State of the Union address, the cabinet, the 2 terms limit, so many things were started by Washington, and they're just how things are done in the presidency. Mm-hmm. And, while the Constitution did lay out what the duties of the president are, I think George Washington is very instrumental in the formation of what, would become the presidency of the United States.
Yeah. And, I think it's... How do I say this? I mean, we've said it a billion times at this point, but, in terms of, the laying the groundwork president, there's, in my opinion, not really another president that could have done that as he did.
Yeah, because, okay, think about it. Imagine if you had John Adams as the first president. Could you imagine a world where that would work?
No.
While I think that John Adams was a capable speaker and a capable leader, and even a capable politician at times, why did that sound so rhythmic? But, like, he wouldn't have been a good, father of the country. Because that's what George Washington was.
Yeah.
He wasn't really a politician. He was the country's dad. Weirdly, he never fathered any children of his own. He was actually sterile from smallpox. He did have stepchildren, though, including George Washington Custis, who, or no, that was his adoptive son, but technically his wife's grandson from, like, another marriage.
That's weird.
Yeah. And his daughter, Martha Custis, married this guy named Robert E. Lee.
About that.
Also, Zachary Taylor's niece married Jefferson Davis.
See,
She died very soon after.
like, I don't know. Like, another thing is, like, we've obviously said for a good president to be elected, they have to be somewhat sociopath / psychopathic. And in all honesty, in terms of that, I
think-
feel like George Washington is like, he's a good example for how you really only need a very small amount.
Boys, girls, non-binary friends,
It's just like
other gender identities.
It's just like. There we go.